Colombia is a country with a dark history. With four different guerrilla movements and some paramilitary groups, the country has been fighting the longest civil war in the Occidental Hemisphere. In 1964, there were two guerrilla movement forms. The biggest guerrilla movement in the country was the FARC, Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia. It's a Marxist political party that was at war with the Colombian state as a guerrilla organization between 1964 and 2016. Founded by farmers and field workers as a revolution against the government and the mistreatment of police and army officials against the farmers, its goal was to create social equality in the country. At first, people will support the movement. Within few years, the movement became an extremely violent group. Killing, kidnapping, extortion, raping, and drug trading, the FARC started to become an issue. The group wanted to take over the government, and their criminal activity started a war. By the end of the 90s, the FARC had consolidated its position as the strongest guerrilla movement in contemporary Latin America, doubling the size of its armies to between 50,000 and 20,000 soldiers, while simultaneously expanding its political economic power to nearly half of Colombia's territory. In 1962, a group of university students and some priests traveled to Cuba in order to train and prepare to create a revolutionary group. Its goal was to take over the government and become a socialist government. This group was called the ELN, National Liberation Army. The group was formed on July 4, 1964. One of the founders of the ELN, Priest Camilo Torres, said, "When I realized that the Colombian government could not love its people with equality, then I realized that political, economic, and social structures of the country had to be changed. Then I understood that the love of the people is very much linked to the revolution. We must ask the oligarchy, how are you going to hand over the power? If they are going to give it peacefully, I think we will take it peacefully. But if they only deliver it violently, then we will take it violently." Camilo Torres said this. On 1967, the EPM, Popular Liberation Army, was formed, and this was Colombia's third guerrilla movement. Then, in 1970, after an election fraud, the M19 was formed. This group was formed mostly by university students as a protest to the fraud of the elections, and its goal was to create a government without corruption. The M19 was the smallest guerrilla movement in the country. However, they made history after they took over the Palace of Justice on November 6, 1985, creating chaos in the city by keeping the Supreme Court members, magistrates, congressmen, and civics as hostages. There are some social thinkers that agree that violence is the only way in order to create social changes. One of these is Frantz Fanon. Fanon talked about colonization as the issue that started violence, but we can connect it to the revolutionary movement as Fanon talks about colonization as an oppression. In this case, the oppressive and corruption of the government created a revolutionary groups all through the country in order to fight the oppression. The problem is they decided to use violence for their means in order to achieve a social change. Colombia is now working in a peace treaty, as the violent movement was not able to achieve anything due to their criminal activities. There are two quotes that I would like to connect from Fanon's book, The Record of the World, to this project. The first quote states, "This violent praxis is totalizing since each individual represents a violent link in the great chain, in the almighty body of violence reading up in reaction to the primary violence of the colonizer." The Wreck of the Earth, page 50. The second quote is, "The basic confrontation, which seems to be colonialism versus anti-colonialism, indeed capitalism versus socialism, is already losing its importance. What matters today, the issue which blocks the horizon, is the need for a retribution of wealth. Humanity will have to address this question, no matter how devastating the consequences may be." The Wreck of the Earth, page 55. We have seen in this video how due to the social inequalities and the corruption of a government of the time, the country has been over 50 years of war. A war that have killed over 262,197 people, which at least 215,000 were being civilians. Not only have we seen how the corruption of the government and social inequality of the institution of this country led to a war for over 50 years, we see that now they're seeking to find peace because, in contrary to what Fanon argues that we need violence to fight violence, Colombians realize that they need peace to find violence.